Hello, we're Andrea and Lorna, and we're presenting fashion in the early 19th century.
Okay, the 19th century was a period of huge growth in Britain, which obviously had a big effect on art and design. The Industrial Revolution saw Britain become a major manufacturing power, and it displayed a great exhibition in the 1951. In this period, which was the Victorian period, it was the peak of the British Empire, and designers increasingly looked at this for inspiration.
Silas Marner was written by Victorian novelist George Eliot. It was first published in year 1861. The story takes place in the early of the 19th century in the English village of Revelo.
George Eliot was actually a woman called Mary Ann Evans, and that was her artistic name, and this is the context of why we're doing this research. Let's start with the men's dress. In the early 19th centuries, men's fashion changed. The coat still finished in long tails, but in the front it was cut. The waist lengths were cut. It showed the clothing beneath it, and the lining of the shoulders and upper chest of the coat was sometimes quilted to improve the fit. In the 19th century, specifically in the early 19th century, some dandies wore bone corsets to give them a small waist.
Gradually, men adopted long trousers rather than knee breeches. Trousers became increasingly fashionable at the first quarter of the 19th century. At first, they were only worn for day and informal dress, but in the 1820s, they were acceptable for evening wear. Breeches continued to be worn at court.
Well, in the picture that it's on the right, you can see the coat that it's got at the front and the pants that are long. The tall hat from the late 18th century was still worn, and it developed into more of a top hat, which was worn for day and formal dress throughout the 19th century. And the hair was carefully styled in the windswept look or worn short and curled. We can see here with the drawing here that the top hat is the same as the 18th century, and that the hair was curled.
Women's dresses. As the 19th century progressed, women's dress gradually revealed the actual form of the body. In the 1820s and the 1830s, the waistline depended, returning to its natural position. As the natural waist returned to bodies, required a tighter fit, and in contrast, the skirt became fuller and bell-shaped.
In the past centuries, the dresses were bigger, and they were accentuating other parts of the body. But in the beginning of the 19th century, as we can see in the picture, it became of more of a loose fit, and it accentuated the waist. There were several different sleeve styles, but short puff sleeves were generally worn for evening, and long sleeves for day. And the corsets continued to be worn until the early 20th century. These were lightly bond and quilted with a deep busk. Several layers of petticoats with frilled hems, sometimes of horsehair, were worn to support the full skirt. This was before the Industrial Revolution.
Bonnets or hats were worn outdoors and linen caps indoors. During the 1820s, hairstyles became very elaborate, with raised top knots, and the crowns of bonnets or hats were designed to accommodate them.
In the picture, we can see what we talked about, like the accentuated waist and the puffed sleeves, as well as the hats and the intricate hairstyles. Modern Industrial Revolution entered many inventions in the fashion. Uh, this dress has its white triangular skirt supported on a steel wire artificial crinoline, which before was supported by a petticoat. The dress was probably stitched on the sewing machine, which came into general use in the 1850s. The bright green hose, aniline dyes introduced at this period, which were artificial dyes. The dress is plain with a high neck and long sleeves.
In class conscious 19th century society, fashion was key as a way of demonstrating social position and wealth. Only the very poor or the very rich would dare stray from the decades of the time.
As we can see in the pictures, which were pictures taken for rich people because it was really expensive, the dresses are very fashionable, and they are really big and accentuates their social class. Um, that's it, and here are the references. Thank you.
Thank you.